The project we're going to make today is a game called Pong. For those of you who've never played it before, it's a very old video game that came out when microcomputers were first invented, and it works like a game of tennis. But let's start by getting rid of the cat here. We don't need the cat. We do need to make our own sprites though, so we'll go to our Paint New Sprite icon here, and we want to start with the ball. You basically play this with a ball and a paddle. So we're going to make a nice plain old black ball here as our first sprite, and we'll need another one. We'll need the paddle, so we're gonna paddle is just really a straight line. We don't want to make it too big. We do want to make it straight though. Make it too big, it makes the game too easy. And we'll do a couple things in here to make the game challenging. So first we're going to work on the scripts for the ball, and the first thing we want to do is create some variables, and they're going to be for keeping score and for sensing where the paddle should be at all times. Paddle has to be stuck to the side, obviously, for this particular type of game. So we're going to start with making a variable called hits, and that will keep count of how many times we've actually hit the ball. And we'll make another variable called misses, and we'll make another variable called to designate the position where the paddle is. We'll call that paddle X. That's because it's where on the x-axis the paddle needs to be. It's going to be to the far left, and I'm going to move it over there just so you can kind of see. It should start the game right around here. So first we're going to go and we're going to set those variables. We're going to initialize them. We'll set the hits to 0, and we'll set the misses to 0. And we're going to set our paddle X location to -218. I'm going to switch over to the paddle just for a second here, just so you can see that this, whenever you move the sprites around on the screen, they actually the coordinates appear up on the side, up on the top here, right under the name of the sprite. We're going to set it right. We're at 219 now. I'm going to set it at 218, which is just about right here. And we're also going to rename this. Instead of sprite 2, we're going to call it the paddle. And instead of sprite 1, we're going to call this the ball. And now we're going to show the paddle where it needs to start, or we'll show the ball where it needs to start first, since we're on the ball script here. So we're going to tell the ball, we're going to go to motions, and we could just say to go to this spot, but I'm going to use glide. It makes it a little smoother looking. I'm going to tell the ball to glide to the location. Whoops, I never changed this here. This needs to be paddle X. We're going to tell the ball to glide to the location of paddle X plus 1, and you'll see why plus 1 in a minute. We don't want it to touch the paddle. So I'm going to click on operators, and I'm going to get the plus, and I'm going to drag our location of our paddle, which we already said is 218, -218. I'm going to say go there, but instead of going to -218, we're going to go to -217, which is 1 in the positive direction. So I'll drag that into the location for X right here. This is going to happen in 1 second, quickly but gracefully, I should say. And Y, we want Y to be exactly in the middle, about where it is now, actually. So that's where we'll tell it to glide to when we start our game. We also are going to tell it where to point, so because that will determine the direction we're going to go, since we're going to use the move command to get it going. So we'll point in the direction. Well, if we point in the direction of 90, it simply will go back and forth and back, and this will be maybe the most boring game in the world. It won't bounce at any angles, it'll just go straight back and forth. And if we leave our paddle there, we can basically go eat lunch and come back, and we would have that many hits and 0 misses. That would be not very challenging. So we're going to instead have it create a random number. We're going to point in a random direction, And we want that random direction to be, well, let's see, somewhat, we're going to say somewhere between 45 degrees, which will be going up in this direction, to 135 degrees going in this direction. So we'll say 45, pick a random number from 45 to 135 to start with. We're going to make it a little more challenging in a minute. Now we're going to create a forever loop, and in that forever loop we're going to tell the ball what to do. We want it to move 10 blocks at a time, or 10 steps at a time I should say, and we also want to tell it that when it hits the other edge over there, or the top or the bottom, to bounce, or actually behind it. If it hits behind the paddle over here and we miss it, we want it to bounce there too. But we want to count that though to tell how many misses we've had, and we want it, whenever it hits the paddle, we want it to count that as hits. Now you might notice up here we have these three variables displayed. The way we can control that is by checking or unchecking them. Now we don't really need the paddle X to show. We do want to show the hits and we do want to show the misses. In fact, maybe we can drag them over and center them a little better. And now we're going to go down and finish what goes inside our forever loop. But we're going to put an if statement inside that forever loop. And this is basically going to tell if the paddle touches the ball, or the ball touches the paddle, I should say. So we're going to say if, put that right after the motion statements. And we're going to say, go to the sensing palette and pull out if the ball is touching the paddle, then we want it to do whatever is inside this if statement. We're going to tell it to first count and change our hits by 1. The hits will go up to 1. We've already set them to 0 at the beginning of the game, and now as soon as it touches the paddle, the hits go up by 1. And we also wanted to point it in a direction that is maybe a little unpredictable. Because if it keeps bouncing the same way as it hits, again, it will be an extremely predictable and boring game. So we want to take our random number generator here, and I'm going to right-click that up there to duplicate just the green random number generator. Drag it over here, and I'm going to change the numbers and make them a little less predictable. Instead of bouncing at 45 degrees like this and 135 like this, it can go anywhere from 10, which is almost like straight up just about, to 170, which is almost straight down. So we're gonna broaden that randomness a little bit, make it a little less predictable. So 10 and then 170. All right, so that's gonna handle the ball when it hits the paddle, and it's gonna also count how many times it hits. The only thing it isn't doing is it isn't counting how many times it misses, and we want it to do that too. So we're gonna drag another starter flag down here, and we're going to put a forever if loop here because we want this to keep on going, and we want to ask if the position of the ball becomes to the left of the paddle, in other words we've missed, we want it to count that as a miss. So we already know that position is called paddle X. So we're going to say, we're going to go over to the sensing, and we're going to say, tell me if the X position of the ball is, and we got to be careful here because we're looking at negative numbers, so a negative number that gets, where the number itself gets larger but it's negative, is actually getting smaller. So we want to get an operator that says the position of X is less than, you guessed it, paddle X. So we put paddle X in there, and we're going to grab it right by the middle, by the green, so it takes the whole thing, and plug it in that conditional, that little diamond, which is where we put our condition. And then we're going to say, if it does do that, we want to change our misses, not hits, misses, by 1, and we want to tell everybody we missed, because we're going to do something special with that. We're going to broadcast a statement called miss. Okay, we're going to broadcast a message to everybody in all the scripts that say that the ball was missed, and we're going to put a little delay in there, and the delay is necessary because believe it or not, between this paddle and the wall where it hits are several values. We don't want it to add a miss for every single value it hits. We want it to do it one time, then we want it to wait a second, and by then it will have bounced back out and it won't be counting anymore. So that delay is going to be necessary. Now I'm going to left click this area, click on cleanup, lines things up nicely for me, and then next we're going to do the paddle script and the background scripts.